A few hours ago, Glitch posted something on social media that I think a lot of people in this community might have scrolled past without fully registering what it means. The post reads, Gameoverse officially drops May 15th. We are so excited to share with you this special animated pilot that Rubber Ross has been working on for years. We hope you enjoy it. The team has been working hard to make this an amazing watch. May 15th, that is days away. And if you are not familiar with Gameoverse or with Rubber Ross, let me give you the context, because the backstory behind this pilot is genuinely one of the more interesting things happening in indie animation right now. Ross O'Donovan, known online as Rubber Ross, originally created the first version of Gameoverse back in 2009 on Newgrounds. It ran for a handful of short episodes and then went quiet. But Ross never actually let the idea go. He picked it back up in 2014, started rebuilding it from scratch on a live stream, and spent the next several years trying to figure out how to bring it to life properly. Kevin and Luke Lerdwichigel, the founders of Glitch, saw an early animatic of it back in 2017 and were immediately interested. The one thing holding the deal back was that Ross wanted Gameoverse to be 2D, and Glitch at the time was known almost exclusively for 3D. Once Glitch committed to 2D with Knights of Guinevere, that conversation finally moved forward. So, what we are getting on May 15th is the result of over a decade of work. The premise is an action comedy built around a hero named Kit and her sidekick Caboodle, who travel between video game worlds that are collapsing. The twist is that the only way to save each world is to help the villains win, because completing the game is what destroys it. That setup alone has a lot of room to go interesting places tonally, and knowing Glitch, I would not expect it to stay light for long. The voice cast includes Erica Lindbeck, Jay Schlatt, Chris Sabat, Elsie Lovelock, and Michael Cusack, with music by Grant Kirkhope and Jake Kaufman. That last part is worth a moment. Kirkhope did Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye. Kaufman did Shovel Knight. For a show set inside video game worlds, that is exactly the right call. Ross also mentioned in a post that he is dedicating this pilot to Monty who encouraged him to make the show years ago. That detail adds a layer to this that goes beyond just another Glitch release. Now, here's the part that I keep thinking about. Gameoverse drops May 15th. The amazing Digital Circus finale drops June 19th. We are in the final stretch of the biggest show Glitch has ever made, a show that went from a YouTube pilot to a Netflix deal to a theatrical release in international markets, and right in the middle of that closing chapter, Glitch is putting out the debut of their next project. That is a deliberate move. The audience that grew around Digital Circus is massive, and launching Gameoverse while that audience is still fully engaged and paying attention is not a coincidence. They are betting that if Gameoverse lands well with this community, it does not need years to build momentum the way Digital Circus did back in 2023. The pressure on this pilot is real, and I think it is worth being honest about why. Digital Circus was not just a successful show, it was a cultural moment. The pilot dropped in October 2023 and hit 100 million views in roughly 2 weeks. People who had never watched an independent animated series in their lives were talking about it. That kind of reach is not something you can manufacture or plan for. It either happens or it does not, and it happened to Digital Circus in a way that very few things do. So, when I look at Gameoverse, I genuinely want it to succeed. The creative pedigree is there, the production quality from the trailer looks strong, and Glitch has earned enough trust with this audience that people will show up for the pilot. But there is a version of this where Gameoverse is a great show that never becomes a phenomenon, and I think that is actually fine. Not every project needs to replicate what Digital Circus did. The problem is that the industry, and honestly, a lot of fans, will measure it against that benchmark whether it is fair or not. What makes this moment a little bittersweet is that June 19th is not just the YouTube premiere of Episode 9, it is the end of the amazing Digital Circus as an ongoing story. A show that started as an indie YouTube pilot and ended with a theatrical release in over a dozen countries. After that, there is no more new content coming. The characters, the lore, the theories, all of it closes, and Glitch moves forward with new things, which is the right call creatively, but it does mean that the community that built itself around this specific show will have to find a new center of gravity. Maybe Gameoverse becomes that. Maybe something else does. I honestly do not know, but something changes after June 19th, and I think it is worth acknowledging that before it happens. I will be watching the Gameoverse pilot on May 15th, and I will have thoughts. If you want to stick around for that, you know what to do. And before you go, I want to know 2 things from you. Are you going into Gameoverse with high expectations, or are you deliberately keeping them low to avoid the Digital Circus comparison? And now that we are almost at the end, what is the one thing you are most hoping the finale actually answers?